Welcome, fellow explorers. My name is Christian Alexanderson, and this is Hemlocks to Hellbenders, a podcast highlighting Pennsylvania's parks, forests, and great outdoors. It's December 26, 1776. General George Washington has just successfully gotten 2,400 men from the Continental Army across the Delaware River from Pennsylvania into New Jersey. The first year of the American Revolution has been a difficult one. The young United States has had few victories battling the highly skilled British Army and their paid German mercenaries, the Hessians. Washington has retreated from New York after sustaining significant losses during the Battle of Long Island. Morale is low. Supplies, even lower. Men are deserting. And it seems like the American experiment is doomed before it's really gotten started. It's bitterly cold. In fact, the other detachments of 3,000 American troops never make it across the freezing river. Washington's troops that did make it across the dangerous river crossing arrived several hours later than planned. The element of surprise might be lost. But none of that matters at this moment. At this moment, Washington is in Trenton leading his troops on a surprise attack. Then, the first shots ring out as the Americans caught the Hessians off guard. The Battle of Trenton was not a grand, orderly clash of polished armies. It was desperate, freezing, chaotic, and brutally human. The streets filled with smoke from musket fire. Cannons boomed at close range. Commands were shouted in English and German. Drums beat. Horses screamed. Snow turned red and brown under boots and hooves. Men lay dying in the streets after musket balls ripped through their flesh. While the battle itself lasted less than an hour, the victory at Trenton revived the American Revolution. It proved the Continental Army could beat professional soldiers. It convinced many whose enlistments were about to expire to stay. More than a battle, it was a turning point, a moment when a failing rebellion felt, for the first time in months, like it might survive. Now, while there's plenty of state parks in Pennsylvania that highlight important history, people, communities, industries, resources, flora, fauna, animals, and more, there aren't many that highlight one specific event. Washington Crossing Historic Park does just that. This episode will go into detail about this all-important surprise attack, but we'll also delve into much more than just that one moment in time. As much as this park is meant to celebrate the brave actions of the Continental Army during the American Revolution, it also serves as a wonderful riverside escape for those looking to spend time outside. Visitors can bring a blanket and picnic basket and watch people paddle down the Delaware River, or they could bring a kayak and get on the historic waterway themselves. Or they can just go for a stroll and check out the historic structures preserved in the park. There's so much to do at Washington Crossing Historic Park, even if you're not a history fan. However, if you are a fan of history, this is one of the best places in Pennsylvania to visit to learn about the American Revolution. But before we learn more about the park, here's the stats. Washington Crossing Historic Park is a 500-acre park located in Bucks County. Available activities include hiking, biking, fishing, kayaking, canoeing, picnicking, wildlife viewing, and winter activities. A notable feature of the park is General George Washington's boat launch site for the Battle of Trenton. The name of the park comes from Washington's river crossing for the Battle of Trenton. Nearby towns include New Hope and Yardley. State lands that are close by include Bowman's Hill Wildflower Preserve, as well as Delaware Crossing, Tyler, Ralph Stover, and Naka-Mixon State Parks, and Delaware State Forest. You may enjoy the park if you enjoy American Revolutionary history. I'm excited to welcome Kimberly McCarty to the podcast. Kim is the museum curator at Washington Crossing Historic Park. Kim, thanks so much for joining the program.
Thank you for having me.
How would you describe the park to someone who's never been there before?
The park is really unique and special. It's not necessarily what people who are frequent visitors to Pennsylvania state parks might expect. So it certainly doesn't have the scale of those sort of stereotypical parks and forests, but it is actually an historic park. And being that the event that we interpret here, Washington Crossing the Delaware, occurred in a location that was pretty active at the time, and then a town built up around it and continued to build up around it. So that part of the park is in a somewhat populated area, and it's actually also unique because it's a one park in two parts, and it's a northern end and southern end, but our insider lingo is the upper park and the lower park. So the lower park is the part that's a little bit more populated. That's the place where Washington crossed the Delaware. And the upper park is just around like 3.5 to 4 miles north of the lower park. And in those couple of miles, it gets quieter and it gets a little calmer. Even though it's a long state route, it gets quieter and calmer. Yeah, so I think we're pretty unique within the park system.
Washington Crossing Historic Park is a National Historic Landmark. It preserves the site of George Washington's dramatic boat crossing of the Delaware River during the American Revolution. Can you tell us about that important event?
Well, there's a lot to tell, so I will try not to run on ad nauseum. But uh, most people who come here are aware of, the very basics. Washington crossed the Delaware on the evening of December 25th, and it was Christmas Eve, meaning Christmas evening, not Christmas Eve in the way that we kind of use that terminology now to mean December 24th. So Christmas evening, um, crosses the Delaware with 2,400 troops to attack Hessian forces at their outpost in Trenton. And a lot of people in the country and internationally are familiar with the famous Washington Crossing the Delaware painting by Emanuel Leutze. And although he wasn't here, and he certainly wasn't here when he painted it, that is, this place is where that event that he depicts took place. So Washington is he is facing a bit of an issue when he finally makes it across New Jersey and into Pennsylvania. He is being followed from New York after some defeats in New York by the British Army. And every time he has to leave various parts of New Jersey, he's really unhappy about that. He doesn't want to have to leave New Jersey. And it becomes obvious that he is going to have to leave New Jersey and come into Pennsylvania. So even though he's leaving, he's kind of got this idea in his head that it's not going to be for long. It's not going to be for long. And as he's getting closer to Trenton, where he's going to make the crossing into Pennsylvania, he's starting to make plans the closer he gets to have boats, most famously Durham boats and ferries brought to Trenton to help cart the army across into Pennsylvania. He's also making arrangements for boats up and down the New Jersey shoreline to be brought to Pennsylvania to keep them out of British and Hessian hands. And he makes that crossing in early December, around December 8th. They start coming, they're in Pennsylvania, and then they disperse into various encampments. And they're really peppered all up and down the Pennsylvania shoreline from but the sort of the a few of the major clusters are Bristol with Cadwallader and at the around the Trenton Ferry, and then you've got um, actually at you have Stevens Brigade at McConkey Ferry, which is the ferry that is in our park, and some up at Coriel's Ferry, which is now known as New Hope. And then again, there are also other contingents all along there. So at Beaumont's Ferry, which is midway between McConkey and Coriel's, is where Lord Sterling has, and he was an American, or he was a general for the American Army. and his encampment and soldiers were there at Beaumont's Ferry. And Beaumont's Ferry is right next to the Thompson Neely House, which is part of our park. So that encampment spilled over into Robert Thompson. It was his property, his mill. It all spilled onto that property. So if you come to the park, if you're at the upper section, the Thompson Neely section, there was an encampment there. The lower section, the McConkey Ferry, there was artillery dug in to guard, because you had to guard all the ferries and the fortifications. And that's what he was doing. I mean, it was strategic. He didn't just randomly decide to leave troops along the shoreline. I mean, the idea was to get to the other side, to get to Pennsylvania, to put the Delaware River as a barrier between himself and the British, but there were ways to get across. And so he was thinking of ways to prevent that for the British. And again, he's thinking of how is he going to get back? How is he going to get back to New Jersey? On top of that, he's got some other issues. He's got supply, or better yet, lack of supply issues. They are coming in, to be sure. They're trickling in from different areas, but you never have as much as you really need in these situations. And he also has a lot of soldiers' enlistments expiring at the end of the year. And all of these things are converging to a point where he has to make a decision. And, he needs to do something. And by the way, in, no small issue in his mind is the defense of Philadelphia, the capital. And, he's afraid if the river freezes that the British are going to come and take the colonial capital. So he's got all of these things going on, and he comes to the decision with his leadership that, meaning his generals, that they are going to attack the outpost at Trenton and attack the Hessians. And they decide to do that the morning after Christmas, so the December 26th in the morning. That's the plan. And to do that, he would have to cross at on Christmas night. He arranges, best laid plans, right? He arranges for his troops to come and cross at McConkey's Ferry. So brigades, troops that are in Newtown come down, from Coriolis come down. They're timing it so that they can meet at McConkey's. There's supposed to be a crossing at the Trenton Ferry. There's supposed to be a crossing at the Bristol Ferry. This idea of this multi-pronged approach to Trenton, cut Hessians off that might be trying to escape. And of course, if you're familiar with the Delaware River, and I don't know how many listeners are, McConkey's Ferry, where we are, is above the falls. There are falls at Trenton. And below the falls, the river is tidal. And above the falls, it isn't. And as you get progressively south, so of these designated crossing points, McConkey's is the furthest north. So it is the narrowest as far as these three locations are concerned. The further south you get, the wider it gets. And when you get to Philadelphia, it's quite impressive. Even at Bristol, it's quite impressive. So these are the challenges. And then we are faced with the additional challenge of the weather. And a nor'easter kicks up that day. So the plan is made, decisions are made. Soldiers who are encamped are to pack up and head down, or either down or over to McConkey's, or to wherever they are assigned to cross. And now with the weather acting the way it is and being very uncooperative, you've got that issue as well. And the river swells. So now the wider parts are even wider than um, than they are obviously without the storm. And you've got ice piling up on the riverbanks, making it very challenging, particularly further south at Trenton and at Bristol, to get across and to get your horses and artillery up over the slabs of ice that are piling up on the riverbanks. I should also mention the fact that the reason ferries are chosen is because ferries make life a lot easier if you are trying to transport horses,
Yeah.
artillery across the river. You don't want to try to get a horse into a Durham boat. And a Durham boat, if your listeners are unfamiliar with a Durham boat, think a canoe that's really, really big. It can be between 40 and 60 feet long. It's really they're meant to haul cargo. That's their normal function. So they're really handy when it comes to piling a bunch of soldiers in and getting them from one end of the river to the other. Trying to put a horse into that, it's not going to work so well. So it's not a coincidence that ferries are chosen for this task. And as it turns out, after all of this, the only successful crossing is here at McConkey's. In Bristol, Cadwallader is able to get across, but not his artillery. And that is obviously a real disadvantage if you're trying to, attack an outpost. And it's so bad, he thinks that surely none of the other crossings took place either. And, he will find out the next day that Washington was able to get across. But at the time, it turns out that Washington and these 2,400 soldiers are the ones who make it across. And that's the story, the basic story of what happened here. And then, of course, they go to Trenton. The crossing takes many hours longer than had been anticipated, and timing is everything. It was rather stressful to get there, not knowing. The idea was to attack at dawn, and there was no way they were going to get there at dawn. And in fact, they did get there later, but they still had the element of surprise. The Hessians, were not expecting an attack on this scale. The battle was not very long, and the Americans were victorious and took about 900 Hessian prisoners. And then Washington had a decision to make. Do we stay here or do we go back? And given how long sort of the conditions of some of the soldiers and how long they had been up and how exhausted they were and, the efforts they had put forward and, other reasons that he factored in, he ultimately makes a decision to come back to Pennsylvania. Washington Crossing, because it is an encampment site, really of two encampments. The encampment of Stevens Brigade near McConkey's Ferry, the encampment of Sterling's Brigade at Beaumont's Ferry that spills over to Robert Thompson's house. We have two encampment sites, and there are many, many stories to tell here, interpretively. It's a fascinating place, it's a fascinating story.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I finished not too long ago, 1776 by David McCullough, and I think it really it demonstrates how uncertain the American Revolution was. when you tend to learn about it, you learn about the big victories or you learn about some of the big defeats. But at this point in time, it was big losses from New York. They were retreating. Even if it was a tactical retreat, they were still retreating. A lot of these men didn't have the supplies they needed. The Continental Congress wasn't providing a ton of funding. Like you said, these troops were just leaving because they were like, well, my time is up and we have to go do these various things. Also, because it's winter, uh, during this time period, troops didn't really fight in the winter. You wintered over somewhere. Valley Forge is obviously very famous here in Pennsylvania. So the attack was a brilliant, bold stroke. That was the reason it caught them off guard, was because it was like, well, who's gonna attack now? And there's that kind of that myth of the Hessians being drunk while it was happening. That's more proven probably not to be true. The vast majority of them certainly were not. But just the idea of like, it was so uncertain that not only was the American Revolution probably not going to work, but this attack wasn't going to work. Like the idea of everything was up against Washington and his troops. And even though only 1 out of 3 of the segment troops that came over were able to perform the attack, the fact that it went so well is miraculous. I mean, it's what probably saved the revolution in its early year.
Yeah, victory was never guaranteed. And you're right, for decades, centuries after the revolution, a lot of us who learned, our first exposure to this was in school. Uh, for a long time, it presented as if it was inevitable.
Yeah.
And it was anything but inevitable. There was, you know, um, I don't know that it's popular to say, but luck played its hand a lot in a lot of these matters. And yeah, I mean, and Washington, the advantage that he had is that obviously victories on the battlefield are are important and go a long way, but surviving,
Yeah.
surviving, that army surviving and not being vanquished meant that the British still had to keep going at this. And, the British were tethered in a lot of ways to certain areas because they had to get their supplies in.
Ports. Yeah.
And, whereas Washington could go a little further inland. But certainly, the population was divided. And people who were loyalists, were treated in a certain, in a certain way, treated others in a certain way. It was tumultuous in a lot of ways. And yeah, nothing at all was guaranteed. And of course, then afterward, this is the crossing is the first day in what historians since the past couple of decades have referred to in their academic papers as quote unquote the 10 crucial days. That's not how I was taught it in school, but then I'm quite old, so things are very different now. But it starts with the crossing and ends with the Battle of Princeton on January 3rd of 1777. And, so you have Washington comes back, then he goes back over and he's planning to go to Princeton. And there is what's called the Second Battle of Trenton, sometimes called the Battle of the Assunpink Creek in Trenton, where he engages in a very bloody confrontation with the British, and then at night pulls up stakes and heads to Princeton. So, after the victory at Princeton, then that's when Washington and the Americans go into their winter encampment.
Where in the park can visitors learn more about the crossing?
Oh, it's everywhere. We make sure it's everywhere. You can come into our visitor center, and the Friends of Washington Crossing Park, who is a partner with the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources here, runs public programs, guided tours. So you can take a guided tour. And if you come here in 2026, you will be able to see what will be newly installed interpretive signage, waysides that bring you by the river. And there is a video in the auditorium. There's an exhibit gallery uh, also that will teach you, give you some information about that. So we have it all over. And there are tours also available of the Thompson Neely House. So if you come into the visitor center or look online, those options are available. So you can learn more about the encampment at the Thompson Neely House, take a tour down here. There are a lot of options. We try to layer the information so that you're not kind of drinking out of a fire hose in one place and getting everything so you can get it. I mean, I think I've kind of drowned you in this exposition, but you know, we try to be a little more elegant than
What will visitors see if they attend the annual Christmas Day reenactment of the river crossing?
well, what you'll see is probably around 150 or so. That's a guess. Reenactors who come, and as you would imagine, they are dressed in period correct clothing and uniforms, and they reenact the crossing of the Delaware. So we don't have a ferry here, so you won't see that, but we do have some Durham boats, and the reenactment is done twice in December. So there's the one that's done on Christmas Day every year. And then there's one done around 2 weeks earlier. You can look at the website. And that one actually has more activities taking place um, on, in the park, in addition to the reenactment itself. So there are craftspeople and there's other interpretation taking place. So, oh, and I will say there is another little program that is starting to um, get some feet and is very exciting. That in December also there is an encampment program that's up at the Thompson Neely House, and you can see some brush huts that are the educators that the Friends educators have made, and they are reenacting the encampment up there. So that's absolutely worth seeing because, like I said, it's such a huge. It's not the famous part of our story, which is also important, but it is a big part of our story. And I would encourage visitors to go explore that as well.
Ever since I found out about, so I'm originally from New Jersey, but ever since I found out in Pennsylvania about the river crossing, it's been like a goal of mine to see it and to try to convince my family to to mess with Christmas plans to be able to see it hasn't worked appropriately. But the fact that I can go beforehand and see it is really great. It's
You can go beforehand.
yeah.
The encampment program is, I believe it's sort of afternoon to early evening, like 1 till 5, something something thereabouts. And then the next day is the reenactment, and that's the one that has all the other activities. And I completely understand because, to be completely honest with you, until I worked here, I had never attended the Christmas Day crossing. I'd attended the other one, but not the Christmas Day crossing. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's well worth it, particularly to see the encampment. And there is an encampment element, to be fair, of the reenactment of the crossing itself. They do have some of that down here as well. So I don't want to completely take away from that.
And now, let's hear from our sponsors. Looking to get outside this winter? Join Keystone Trails Association for guided hikes highlighting bird migration, maple sugaring, and more. To learn more, visit kta-hike.org. It's better outside, especially with a Purple Lizard map in your pack. Their award-winning cartography helps you see the big picture and explore some of the best outdoor destinations in Pennsylvania. Each map reveals trails, forests, and small towns waiting to be discovered, helping you plan, wander, and reconnect with the world around you. Discover the Pennsylvania Outdoor Recreation Map and the full collection at purplelizard.com, where outstanding maps lead to outstanding adventures. Hey fellow explorers, this is a message from the Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation. You know those incredible state parks and forests Christian talks about on every episode? We're the ones helping make sure they stay incredible. From maintaining the trails you hike to engaging volunteer groups who make your experience better, to supporting conservation projects that protect Pennsylvania's natural treasures while keeping these places accessible. We're behind the scenes making it happen. Whether you're planning your next waterfall hike or just dreaming about your favorite overlook, know that PPFF is working to preserve these special places for future generations of explorers. Learn more at paparksandforests.org. Looking to add some Pennsylvania charm to your space? Sister Sunflowers has you covered. Their unique stickers highlight the small local spots that make your community shine, from quirky caves to hidden gems. Perfect for your laptop, water bottle, or anywhere that needs a little hometown love. They got stickers, magnets, prints, and even a hand-drawn poster to keep track of the Pennsylvania state parks and forests you've explored. Use code HELLBENDER15 for 15% off your first order. Support local, inspire adventure, and decorate with meaning. Only at Sister Sunflowers. Are you looking for a getaway that feels remote yet is surprisingly easy to reach? Discover Clarion County in western Pennsylvania. Within minutes, you can wander the timeless old-growth beauty of Cook Forest or paddle the peaceful Clarion River. Explore endless trails, breathe deep, and find the escape you've been missing. With lodging from luxury cabins and high-end Airbnbs to family campgrounds and budget-friendly hotels, your perfect stay awaits. Plan your escape at discoverclarioncounty.com. Clarion County, your trailhead to happiness. Ready to trade the office commute for fresh treks in Pennsylvania's Laurel Highlands? Close the laptop, grab your gear, and get out on snow-covered terrain. You can ski or snowboard at your choice of 4 resorts, or you can cross-country ski or snowshoe, or take a winter hike and soak it all in. And when it's time to slow things down, there's still plenty to do. Settle in with great food, plenty of laughs, and a cozy place to stay. Maybe a cabin in the woods, a treehouse hideaway, or even a stay at Nemacolin, an ultra-luxury resort. You can plan your winter escape at golaurelhighlands.com. All right, back to the show. The park is split into 2 sections, as you mentioned earlier, the upper and the lower. Let's start with the upper. What sort of things can visitors see in the upper section of the park?
The upper section, as I mentioned, has the Thompson Neely House. There's the house and the grounds that surround it. There is a mill that was associated with the family. Robert Thompson was a miller. And the mill that we have now is actually the 3rd iteration of the mill. It's from around 1870 or so. The original mill that was built in the 1740s was closer to the house. And then when the canal was built, it affected the level of Pitcock Creek, which of course impacted the operation of the mill. So then it was moved. And then that mill burnt down around 1870 and was rebuilt to what we have now. So if you go to the upper section of the park, you would see the Thompson Neely House. The mill is up there. Both are available for tours. You have to go on the website and book ahead, but they're available. And the soldiers' graves are up there. So you can visit that. And also we have the Bowman's Hill Tower, which is a memorial, was built really as a memorial for the soldiers and to memorialize and commemorate the crossing itself. And that was built around 1929. And it's on a hilltop, Bowman's Hill. And it's an area where there could have been Continental Army lookouts, depending on how the makeup of the hill. And what I mean by that is, you know, was it filled with trees or not? Obviously, that's going to impact your visibility. But if you visit Bowman's Hill Tower, you can go in there and climb up to the top, and you see really a wonderful view over to the house, over to the Thompson Ely house, certainly way into New Jersey, the whole surrounding area. It's quite beautiful.
And I think you only have to pay a couple bucks to access the tower. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. The admission fees here are uh, fairly low, pretty reasonable, so that we are accessible. Now, walking around is free because we are a state park. It's if at Bowman's Hill, if you want to go inside the tower, then there's a fee for that. If you want to take a guided tour at any of our locations, there's an admission fee for that. But just to walk around, that's free.
Also, in the upper section, you have Bowman's Hill Wildflower Preserve. We did an episode on that previously. It's such a wonderful space. What do you think about it?
It is. It's a wonderful place. They are also partners. So the property that they're on is part of the park, but it is operated by the Wildflower Preserve, and they, I believe, are going pretty shortly coming up on their centennial anniversary. I think they were established in 1934, so hopefully they're planning something wonderful up there to celebrate that. But it is around 100 acres, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It is a wildflower preserve. You know, they do some good work up there. I There are some trails that you can wander around. I'm not sure about their admission policies, but it's certainly really very beautiful and serene.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I've been there a couple times now, and another one of those things where it's a couple bucks to get in, but I think it's so wonderful. The trails are really fun. They have a medicinal plant trail that tells you all about the different plants that were used by indigenous cultures here in Pennsylvania. Historic structures. It's also America's first outdoor native plant museum. So I think that's really cool too.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
I certainly would check it out. I actually met somebody in a barber shop that randomly was talking, and I found out he was proposing to his girlfriend the week after I recorded that episode. So I was very excited for him. I was like, "Oh, I know all this stuff about Bowman's Hill. It's really fun."
Yeah, we get that sometimes with the tower too. Uh, People make plans and to propose. It's quite lovely.
While there's limited walking and hiking opportunities in the park, the upper section provides visitors with the opportunity to connect to the 60-mile long Delaware Canal State Park towpath. Can you tell us about the towpath?
The towpath, actually, you can access the towpath from the lower section too, because as
Mm-hmm.
you said, it is 60 miles long, so it goes right through both sections. It is, if you're going to access it from the upper park, that's actually going to bring you right past the Thompson Ely House, by the Soldiers' Graves Memorial, and if you head north, you'll go up to New Hope and beyond, and south it'll bring you to the lower park, and then if you are so inclined, yeah, all the way down to Yardley and and all the way down to Bristol if you want. Uh, it actually is its own separate park, so the Delaware Canal State Park, and those two areas are where our parks well, a couple of areas where our parks cross over, and it's really a lovely area. I've been on it several times just to take a nice long walk, to get outside. It's a relatively flat surface, so it's easy on yourself. If you want to just some people run, some people can leisurely walk, some people ride bicycles. Of course, just be aware that you are sharing that space with people who are doing that. Um, but the canal itself I'm a little bit more familiar with the history. That is built starting in the 1820s. It finishes in, I think it's 1832 is when it's complete. And the towpath along it was used. I mean, it is literally what it sounds like, a towpath. So the mules who would tow the barges, the mule team would be hooked up to the barges that are in the canal and would, pull them along, pull the cargo along. So, but if you are looking for a place to take a nice, long, lovely walk, the Delaware Canal towpath definitely uh, would give you that.
Well, let's move on to the other section of the park, which is the lower section. What can visitors see if they explore the lower section of the park?
That is where we've got our visitor center. So you can see the exhibit gallery. You can certainly go in. There's facilities in there. If you want to take a guided tour, that's where you would go to purchase tickets for that. If you'd rather just stay outside and have a little time on your own with your own thoughts or with your family and friends, you can walk around. We've got a historic village that actually, for the most part, post-dates the crossing. So it's early 19th century, called Taylorsville. And those buildings are part of our park. And the McConkey Ferry, and of course, where Washington crossed the Delaware, is right there, right next to the Washington Crossing Bridge. And if you take the tour, then you will be able to go inside. Right now, we actually just over the past few years underwent a major restoration project for the building exteriors. So we are currently working on a restoration project for the interior of McConkey's Ferry. So depending on when your listeners hear this, hopefully they'll hear it when it's open and they can take the tour to take them inside. But the tour is running regardless of whether you can get in there or not. So those are the main things. And of course, that's the lower part is where the crossing reenactment takes place.
One of my favorite areas of the park is the lower section because you can see those historic buildings. There's even I remember there being a garden inside one of the buildings or inside one of the properties. Can you tell us a little bit about those buildings and what they might see?
The buildings, again, they are later, so they were not there. To be clear, they were not there when Washington crossed the Delaware. They're the buildings of Taylorsville, so they're circa 1820, some a little earlier, some a little later, but that's generally their time period. And so what happened was Samuel McConkey, who owned McConkey's Ferry at the time of the crossing, sold the ferry and the surrounding property to a man named Benjamin Taylor in March of 1777, so just 3 months after the crossing took place. He sells the property, and Benjamin Taylor and later his children have this vision for creating a little town, a little hamlet. I don't even know that it was fully a town. To be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure where hamlet starts and town begins, but it's this nice, cozy little place right along the river. And, they go through a lot of effort to try to make it a place where they are encouraging craftspeople to come and to rent some of the houses that they're building. They are trying to make it an area, make it into this little population center, we'll call it. And so they, Bernard and Malin Taylor, who were two of the sons of Benjamin, lived in McConkey's for a little while. Of course, stopped being called McConkey's Ferry and was now Taylor's. And there was no longer a tavern there. It was a temperance house. But you know, the overall purpose was still the same. And they, um, some of the sons became farmers and received some property from their father. Malin uh, was in, he had his hand in a lot of different businesses, shipping, and he was, as far as business is concerned, the most successful one. So he is the one who owned that ferry tract. He's the one who built that glorious uh, house, the big yellow house that's next to the bridge. That's the house where he built for when he married and you know for his wife and their family. And as far as being able to, if anyone's interested in seeing inside, even though they are a little bit later, some of the buildings that are closer to the visitor center are used for interpretation, and they are open typically during special events. So, you know, if you come on your average Wednesday afternoon to take a tour, you'll certainly be able to see the outside of them, but the insides won't be open. But if you're here, say that first reenactment in December, they'll be open and there will be interpretation taking place there. Sometimes with school tours, they're open. Um, and the Friends of Washington Crossing Park actually have their offices in one of the buildings. So, you know, they're beautiful and certainly an important part of the story of the park and the area, though they don't reflect directly on the crossing itself. You know, life goes on. Washington crossed the Delaware and life continued. And, you know, this is what happened. So, but we're fortunate to have those buildings. They're quite beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not like back in the day they shut the place down. They're like, all right, this is all a monument. This is all a park now. This is important for the
Exactly
overall
right.
history. They were like, oh, let's build a town here. It's right next to the river. That looks cool.
Exactly right. And I mean, as the curator, I would have loved it if they had, you know,
Yeah.
closed the doors and wrapped it in bubble wrap and and walked away until we could come back. That would have been magnificent. But that's not really the way life goes. So, you know, the McConkey Ferry itself looks very different than it did the building at the time. You know, there have been uh, large additions put onto it. So the McConkey's Ferry that you look at when you're here is not the McConkey's Ferry or the tavern building that Washington looked at. But again, that's life.
Kim, one of the things I like the most about the park, I've probably been to the park about 4 or 5 times now, is just all the different ways that people use it. Because, like you said, it's not, you can't go to this park and expect vast expanses of forest and, old growth and waterfalls and this, that. But you see people going to each of the historic houses and reading the signs, and they're exploring the garden, and then they're going into the visitor center and they're learning about history, or they're just going for a walk. Or every time I go, I see plein air painters. Like, there's always people painting. So
Yeah,
it's like the fact that there's so many different ways to use this park. If you were to just look at the size of it, you go, oh, okay, it's not that big. It's like, yeah, it may not be, but it is pretty special in terms of just what you could do there and what your interests are. You can kind of do everything you want.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you will see people here for exactly what you would expect. Um, History,
Yeah.
uh, and they are the primary, I guess, the largest group of visitor that we have. But you're absolutely right. Particularly our neighbors use this park for uh, their daily walks. You know, there's a um, lovely couple who I see every morning, and they wave to me, and that's their walk every day. Hi, Ken. uh, and some folks riding their bikes. You know, obviously that's a little bit more seasonal, and walking their dogs. Depending on the part of the park, and painting, like you said, we get people at the lower end. We get a lot of that at the upper end, I think probably because it's quieter, and there are fewer other visitors around, so you can sort of focus on what you're doing. But uh, that's just my guess. I'm not a painter myself, so I'm trying to guess why it's more popular at the upper end than the lower, but it's all over. Yeah, and we are the beneficiary of a lot of affection in that way of visitation.
Do you have a favorite time of year in the park?
Uh, I would say spring, summer. Obviously, historically, the winter
Hmm.
is my favorite as a historian. Uh, but as me just being me, I prefer warm weather to begin with. I like seeing things that are green and growing, and you know although not a fan at all of humidity, but I'll take it as sort of the good with the bad when it comes to having it be warm. Um, so personally, that's my favorite. Yeah.
What do you love most about the park?
Oh geez. For me, it's the history. It's the history. I mean, I have been a lover of history since I was a child, and being able to come here and work on some of the projects, especially the past couple of years that I've been privileged to work on, and really peel back the different stories. And I mean, I said earlier, some places try to say, okay, here is living history as far as sort of domestic life, everyday life versus military life. And there are certainly good arguments in some ways for separating the two. But again, you don't live in a vacuum. So people who are at the Thompson Ely House during this time in December of 1776, their life is now they're living in amongst a military encampment. And of course, soldiers came from the way they grew up. This it's the life that they know. So they do dovetail in a lot of ways. So being able to walk around, and I don't get to do this as often as I would like, but getting able to walk around and say, oh right, that happened right here. That's what's most special to me. As far as the um, physicality of it all, I tend to like where it's quieter. I love there's a little gazebo that is in between the Washington Crossing Bridge and the Mail and Taylor House. It's associated with that big yellow house, and it's been there. It was not added by the park. Mail and Taylor had that built, and I don't get down there often at all. But it's just a beautiful place to just sit down and take it all in. Conversely, up at the soldiers' graves, you know, not everybody left.
Yeah.
And, a couple of years ago, we had the Friends every year do a Memorial Day program to honor the fallen. And the Daughters of the American Revolution supplied a plaque um, for the James Moore grave. And I was so honored to be able to coordinate with the descendant regiment of Alexander Hamilton's artillery group and reach out to them and say, hey, we're doing this. You know, I mean, they know about Hamilton. They nicknamed themselves the Hamilton Zone. I don't know what they knew about James Moore, uh, and reached out and said he was certainly one of your earliest losses, and we would love to have you come and be a part of this ceremony. And they did, and that was very, very moving. So I love different places, different parts or aspects of the park for different reasons.
I mean, as a historian, you have to be pretty hyped up about America 250.
It is, it's coming, isn't it? It is a very big thing in the field. Yeah, it, it it does put everything into perspective in a whole other way. You know, these big numbers are things that we sort of attach ourselves to, right? The centennial of, like I was just saying, the centennial of the wildflower preserve is coming up, the bicentennial, which I do remember. I was a child, but I remember it. And now the 250 of the semi-quincentennial that's coming. It is going to be, I think, I hope something that really engages the public. And I know there has been so much work behind the scenes at uh, historic sites, parks, all over in a way to recognize uh, the, sort of pre-1800 history uh, that that occurred all over. So it's not just, especially for DCNR. I mean, we've been gearing up for all of our parks. So obviously, Washington Crossing, it is going to be the 250th anniversary of that event, which is a big deal. But other parks are going to be offering some historic programming, and people will be reaching and talking about different aspects of their park, and the history of either things that happened in the surrounding communities. So it's, I hope, going to be something that engages visitors, and it has certainly presented these opportunities for uh, groundbreaking research to take place. That is so exciting. It provided provided opportunities to do restoration work that has needed to get done. So those types of projects are the things that I've been working on in order to have them ready for 2026. And I'm very excited about this program.
How much time do you think people need to explore the park?
I would say 3 hours. 3 hours. If you want to go up into the tower, if you want to take the tour at the lower end, if you want to take the tour of Thompson Hill, if you want to do all of them, it's a good 3 hours, maybe even four. Um, Not everybody, in fact, most everybody doesn't do that. They pick a section that they want to do, but some do. I mean, some do, but it's an afternoon.
Yeah, I'm a read every sign sort of guy. So just in case anybody ever sees me, they know I'm the best kind of park visitor. Are there any lesser known spots or activities at the park that you'd recommend for returning visitors looking for something brand new? Maybe.
I would say probably the lesser known parks are the areas in the northern part, around the Thompson Neely area, because as I said, I mean, um, Bowman's Hill Tower has become this landmark, at least a Bucks County landmark. So a lot of people know that, especially at the height of leafing season. Everybody goes there, and of course down here with the reenactment. So I'd probably say around the Thompson Neely House and the Soldiers' Graves area are probably um, the lesser known areas.
Is there something you think everyone should experience when they visit?
Say the Soldiers' Graves. I am very much into providing the tangible human connection. The military stories are in the military history. They're important in their own right, and I don't mean to disparage that at all. But the Army, everything is made up of human beings, and the stories of what they do for each other, what they do to each other in war, and uh, um, that connects us. The technology and living conditions are obviously very different. Culture, in some ways, a lot of ways is very different, but everybody understands the heartache of being separated from your family, the fear, or at least can empathize or should empathize with the fear of a soldier facing a harsh winter and very harsh conditions in an encampment because disease does spread, the fear of going into battle. I mean, they were very brave people, um, but that's there. And the sacrifices that were made, I mean, you know, the graves have people who, are still here with us, physically with us, their remains, who never made it home. And we know one of their names. We know Captain Lieutenant James Moore. The others we don't know. So, what information got back to their families about what happened to them? We don't know. And, I think any time, and it's not that there aren't times where, you can debate about the whether a war is the right way to handle a situation or not. And I'm not here to preach one way or the other. I just want people to understand what it means when you're having the debate, what it means. And then, you decide on your own. But, I feel protective over these people who are still here, and the encampment stories are very compelling. You have women who are following the camp, and and they can do that for a variety of reasons, and some of them are that they can't survive without the men in their family that they're following. And they do this, and they work. They're part of that encampment. They're not freeloaders by any stretch of the imagination. They're doing laundry is one of the major tasks that they have. And think about that. And what that means, that is a lot of work. And they're doing it with babies. These are the stories that can create that visceral connection between our visitors and what happened here. So, I would say go to the soldiers' graves and reflect.
And also one of the great opportunities to be able to, take part in those historical education programs that are available throughout the park.
Absolutely.
There's only so much you can tell people yourself. You have to you rely on other people giving these really great programs and demonstrations and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the various tours and programs and the exhibits and all of that. There's a lot of story here, and you're not going to get all of it at one time. You just can't. You can't. One person can't absorb it all in one visit. And there are some, you know, excellent scholars out there, especially for 2026, that are, publishing uh, some work, additional work on this, and some of the projects we've been working on that reveal uh, more untold stories that haven't been fully expressed. The friends have, their encampment program, and they have followers who, reenactors who are followers and demonstrating what the contribution these women were making. The involvement and contributions of men and women of color to the Army, and what they were doing, not just to the Army, but to the operation. So, casting a wider net, then certainly including the soldiers. Yes, of course, but including people who were in the area, people who were, the boatmen and the ferrymen who did this. I mean, there's so many stories and so much good work going on right now.
Do you have any tips for people who plan on visiting the park or any suggestions to make their visit as enjoyable as possible?
I would say take your time if you're able. I mean, I've traveled myself, and sometimes uh, just being able to land in a place for an hour or two is really all I can spare. So I don't have that luxury of being able to take it all in. If you're able to, though, I would say do that. Uh, Come into the gallery and uh, you know maybe take a tour at the very least. Look at some of the interpretive signage that we have so that you can get a sense of what happened here. And these signs are going to have uh, a lot of original artwork. So it will allow people the opportunity to see these illustrations of the event based on the most recent research that is available. So, I hope that people are able to see that.
Kim, thanks so much for talking to us. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
I want to thank my guest, Kim McCarty, for joining the podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Meta for more information about upcoming episodes. You can support the podcast by buying merch at hemlockstohellbenders.com, or you can click support this show in the podcast description to provide a monthly donation. This has been Hemlocks to Hellbenders. I'll see you out there. Hosting, production, and editing by Christian Alexanderson. Music by John Sauer. Graphics by Matt Davis.